talk about teaching and learning in the context of mobile software development, but a lot of what I talk about is going to be focused on software development in general, so don't worry if you're not a mobile developer. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you, no, it doesn't work. Perfect, thank you. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. When I was growing up, I really wanted to be a teacher. I remember that very distinctly. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a teacher who taught children how to do other things, like math and science and language. But in high school, I fell in love with programming, and I went to university for it. I'm sure a lot of you have also had similar experiences where you write something on a computer, and for the first time you run it, and it's just a magical experience because you've taken an idea that you have in your mind and you've turned it into working software. And that is such a really, just a very powerful experience, having an idea and making it real. And I fell in love with it. So I went to school and I started helping my fellow classmates with their homework assignments. And it was a lot of fun, and I made a lot of friends. It was awesome. And I liked it so much. In my second year of university, I started doing teaching assistant work. First, I was grading assignments that other people had done, and eventually, after a year or so, I moved into mentoring directly with students. So they would try and complete their assignments in the lab, and I would help them complete that and help them understand the concepts of Java development, which isn't really my background. So that led to a couple things. First, at the end of my university degree, I actually got to teach a 3-day course at the university about iOS development, and that was a lot of fun. But what was really cool is that I started to blog about it. Like my experiences, whenever I learned something new about iOS development, I would write a blog post. And it wasn't anything really advanced, it was just a WordPress installation with a basic theme, but it was mine. It was very, I liked it a lot. And when I went to get my first job, I kept on doing that. I kept on blogging whenever I learned something new, whenever I had a new experience. The first time I submitted a beta build to users, and I had people like Big Own and other big tech people reviewing my software. It was really cool for me because I never thought that would happen. So I blogged about it and my experiences. And eventually my writing led to publisher contacting me. There was a guy who was writing a book, but he didn't want to write the boring chapters because they were too easy for him. So they hired me to write the foundation APIs and the FTC. And they needed someone who was an expert at it, and I was not an expert, but I said yes because they thought I was. So I researched, I learned a lot, and by the end of it, I knew a lot about this, and I had written, I had learned enough to write about it intelligently. And that led to some other book deals, and I've been self-publishing lately, which has been really great. And now I have this really amazing job at this company called Artsy, where I get to do open source contributions and things like coming to Minsk and giving a presentation as part of my job, and I love it. So that whole experience has been really, really awesome. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind. The idea of my career and everything has happened because I was blogging, I was sharing information, and how powerful that is. Okay. Awesome. Okay, we want back. Yes, agenda. Nope. Agenda. One forward. One back. Okay, no, sorry, one forward. I have all the notes on my slides, but I can't see the notes. Okay, so what I want to do today is convince you of something. I wanted to let you know that sharing knowledge is not only going to make you a better engineer, but it's going to be good for your business, which is kind of a hard sell because businesses often want to keep things secret. So I'm hoping by the end of this conversation, I've convinced you not only does it make you a better software developer, but it'll help your business. Okay. Cool. Okay. So we're going to talk about 3 things. First, we're going to talk about how it makes you a better software developer. Second, we're going to talk about how sharing knowledge is really good for business. And third, we're going to talk about how to get started. What to do when if I've convinced you, which I hope I have by the end of this, that this is a good idea, then how do we get started? Okay. how many people in the audience today are software engineers or software developers? Raise your hands. Okay, so like a pretty good proportion of you. It's usually really easy to convince software developers that sharing is a good idea. I don't know why, if it's just like it's because we use a lot of open source software. We're very open to the idea of open source and own software. What's difficult for me is to convince software developers that they should write a blog and they should write about their experiences. So I hope I can do that today. So, okay. So the most important thing to me about sharing knowledge is that you get to validate your ideas. If you have an idea for how to solve a problem and you write about it, one of two things is going to happen. The worst case scenario is that you are completely wrong. Your idea is really silly and there's a much better way to do something. If that happens to you and you write something and someone says, well actually here's a better way to do it, that's not a bad thing. You've learned something. Now you have a better solution to that problem. The best case scenario is that you were spot on and your idea was amazing. And now you know it's amazing because someone else has validated that idea. And you've shared that idea so other people can benefit from that, which is really cool. Another thing is that it preserves knowledge. I don't know if this has happened to any of the software developers here. You write some code and then you go away for 6 months or a year. Then you come back to the code and you don't understand it. Or you go to solve the same problem a year later and you think to yourself, I know I've done this before, but I can't remember how I did it. Has that ever happened to anyone? Yeah, a couple of people have. So it's really great. I've had this thing happen where I've Googled for how to solve a problem, and I come across the Stack Overflow answer that I wrote. I'm like, how did I don't know this now, but I knew it then. So by writing what you experience, it's totally, it can be a selfish thing. Like, you can write your own wiki and keep it private, or like there's a tool called TiddlyWiki. TiddlyWiki, it's like a file you put on your Dropbox, and it's just one HTML page and JavaScript that goes with it, and it just is your own private wiki. It's pretty cool. So if you just write stuff for your own purposes, I think that's cool too. Preserving knowledge is really awesome. What I mentioned earlier about my book was research. If you learn enough to build something, like if you learn a new API for iOS or Android or Windows Phone, or BlackBerry even, or anything really, if you learn something new and you just go and build something with it right away, chances are that you only know enough to build something. You don't know the context of how everything actually works. When you learn enough to write about it and explain concepts to other people who don't know them, then you learn a lot more. You're a much more confident developer, and I think that's a good thing. The more we know, the more tools we have in our toolbox for when we need to solve a problem. We have more solutions available to us. Okay, this is really cool. You can make yourself a reputation for someone who writes these things, which is really cool. Because if you're an indie developer and you're looking for a new client, then you're the developer from Minsk who has that really cool blog, and they've heard of you. Or they Google for Minsk Android developer and come across posts that you've written. It shows prospective clients and prospective employers that you know what you're talking about. So it is, again, a benefit for you to be writing things. And this is kind of related to that. When you have a reputation for doing stuff for others, then other people are more willing to do stuff for you. So the next time you need a client, and you need people to retweet you or something to get you that client or that job, or whatever you need, if you launch an application where people download it and rate it, then they're going to reciprocate because they know that you've given it back to them before. And this is sort of the reason I like to do this is because it feels good. Like, I really like writing. I find it enjoyable, and I love helping people because I don't know, it feels good. There's something intrinsic to that. There's a project in the iOS world called CocoaPods. It's kind of like Ruby Gems for iOS development. And my friend Orda is colleague Orda. Technically, he's my boss. that's an open source project, but they don't, and they're not in the top like 10 contributors, so they don't have a reputation for being someone who contributes. So he had these coins machined. He hired a company to make these coins that he's given to the top 80 contributors for CocoaBox, which is really cool. Like we're in the middle of distributing these all over the world, because that's, you know, the contributors are everywhere. And I love this idea of taking an intangible, abstract thing like contributing to open source and making it concrete, something you can hold in your hand. You know, that feels good to me. So that's the software engineering angle. Next, we're going to talk about business. Who here is a marketer, a project manager, a business developer, a boss, anything that's not a software company? Like a few, okay. So I'm hoping I can convince you that sharing knowledge as a business is a good idea. And this is very difficult because businesses tend to want to keep things secret. That is important sometimes, but not always. So the really cool thing that I've learned just recently when I started at Artsy about 8 months ago was that I wanted to use this really cool tool called Reactive Cocoa. It's a functional reactive programming library for iOS. I really wanted to use it, but it's very different than doing things the sort of normal way that you would write an iOS application. By pointing my colleagues to blog posts that I had written about it to get them started, it was very easy for me to convince them to get on board with this. If you have something that your business does that's unique to your business, and you share that information, then when you hire new people, you can provide them with resources and say, this is what you need to get started. So it's really great when you're hiring new people to have this knowledge preserved somewhere so that they can access really easily. Another thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, software developers really like to share. And if you are a company that has a reputation for sharing what you know, then that's going to attract people to your company. That's going to make people want to work for you, because they know that they'll be able to share what they learn and contribute to open source software or write blog posts. You're going to be able to attract really good engineers. Okay. And again, reciprocity. If you're a business that is known for giving back to the community and writing things, then all of a sudden, when you need something, people are there for you. A really great example of this is 37 Signals, now Basecamp. They invented this framework called Rails, written on this really obscure language called Ruby. And they made this because it was how they wanted to write software. They wanted to use this framework instead of PHP or C# or whatever. And so they built it, and then they gave it away. And you're thinking, why did they do that? Because now competitors to Basecamp can use what they gave away for free. But when they go to hire another software engineer, that engineer is probably already familiar with Rails. The benefit to them for releasing Ruby on Rails is that Ruby on Rails is popular, and it makes it really easy to hire developers that already know it. It's the same thing with Google Cloud Services. They give away a lot of things. Amazon EC2 is really popular. It's very cheap because they want people to use it. But when Amazon goes to hire people, when Google goes to hire new engineers, chances are they've already used their software, so they get benefits from that. This one is really important, I think. Codifying knowledge. We have abstract ideas in our heads. Different engineers are familiar with different parts of the code base, but it's very rare for large projects for one engineer to know everything about the whole project. If you've written about the different components of it, you no longer have this idea of tribal knowledge. The idea that there's a developer out there, if they quit or if they get run over by a car or something, then all of a sudden your business is in really big trouble because they were the only person to know certain things about your application. If you've written about that, you can replace that person easily, which is really important if you want to be a business that can withstand, car accidents or what have you. So that's the sort of business angle. Why it's important to share knowledge, I believe, as a business. So how do you get started? It's really, like I said earlier, it's really easy to convince developers to have a GitHub profile. But how do you get started with a blog? Well, it's incredibly easy. You can start a Tumblr for free. GitHub pages are also free with either a Jekyll or Middleman. There are several different static blogging tools out there that make it really easy to write in Markdown with code snippets, syntax highlighting, all that built in for free. Squarespace is another one that I really like if you don't want to deal with, like, say you're an Android developer and web just isn't really your thing. You don't really like to deal with HTML and CSS, just kind of makes you gag. Squarespace is great because they handle everything for you, and you get a site that looks really great, and you can just focus on your writing. So once you write something, you have to share it because it's not really much use if no one knows about it. This is really great. All you have to do is tweet something. Say, like, here's a blog post I wrote about, I don't know, NS arrays or something. And then maybe it's retweets or something. But what's important is that you put it out there. Because if no one's linking to your site, that's really bad. Submit whatever you're writing to Hacker News or Designer News or Reddit or any of these sites that kind of aggregate this sort of information. And that's really important because it's going to make it easier for Yandex and Google and other search engines to find your content. So that way, when someone has the same problem that you had when you wrote your post, they can find your blog post, they can find your Tumblr really easily. So that's really important. Eventually, you're going to gain RSS subscribers or Twitter followers or Facebook friends or whatever social media stuff you want to do. And when you write something, they're going to share it for you, which is really, really awesome. So you don't have to deal with that. Eventually, this sort of takes care of itself. An example is on the artsy engineering blog when we wrote about, what was it? We had a new way to do aspect-oriented programming on iOS using a library that Pete Steinberger wrote, which is really cool. Really great for things that touch all parts of your code, like logging or analytics tracking. We wrote this post, and then people were really excited about it, and they shared it. Like, we didn't have to promote it or anything; it just happened. So, how do you decide what to share? This is really, really key because you can't, as a business, share everything you do. As a software developer, you can't open source every line of code you write. That's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just not feasible. So how do you decide what to share? It really comes down to whether or not this thing you're thinking about sharing is part of your company's core intellectual property. And what I mean by that is it what makes you you? Is it something that is completely unique to you as a business or you as a developer, or is it something that other people can benefit from? And really, what I think is a good example is Artsy's website. Our front end of our website is completely open source. You can go and check it out. It uses the API, which is available for anyone to use. Really cool. If you're curious about how we do something on our site and you want to do it yourself, then you can go look up the code and see how it works. But the parts of our product that make us unique are the recommendation engine for artworks and our database of we call them genomes of artworks. So we have a large portion of our company who are art historians and art experts who classify different artworks based on the artist and what period it's from and the elements of the artwork, its color, everything. And that information is very important to us because it's what separates us from our competitors. So that is not open source. But over the past couple of years at Artsy, they've developed this thing called open by default. The idea is really simple. Unless you have a reason to keep something secret, why wouldn't it be public? When we wanted to build auction kiosk, it's an iPad application that you can look at artworks in an art auction, and you can bid on them, you can pay for them by swiping your credit card, the whole 9 yards. We did it all, and we did it open source, and we just released it 2 weeks ago. But the development of it has been open source from day one, so we finished it and then released it. It's been done. And the tools weren't really there for that. There were some things that we need to keep secret in our application, like API keys. So my colleague Orta wrote some software that would use the OS 10 keychain in order to keep keys private from other developers. So they'd have to go register their own keys if they wanted to use the software. So it was really great. The tooling didn't exist, so we invented it. And again, that's another thing we did open source. So to kind of wrap things up, I talked about how sharing makes you a better software developer, a better engineer. Sharing knowledge is good for your business. It's not always good. Sharing everything is probably not the best idea. But deciding what to share is a skill that you'll acquire as you do it more. And eventually, your business will actually benefit a lot from having a reputation as a business that shares things. And finally, I hope I've convinced you getting started is easy. If you're a company, start a company blog. If you're a developer, start your own blog. And when you learn something, blog about it. If you're a developer who doesn't want to have a blog, then when you learn something new you couldn't find an answer for on the internet, write a Stack Overflow question describing your problem, and then answer that question yourself with the solution that you came up with. And then other people can benefit. This is a quote that my old boss, John Lax, used to say all the time. And he got it from Tim O'Reilly, I believe. And in April 2012, Tim O'Reilly, the head of this huge publishing corporation, I'm sure you're familiar with the O'Reilly books, he said, create more value than you capture. And this is a really important idea to me. When you use a piece of open source software in order to build something new, you're capturing value. No one else really has access to the stuff that you built. But when you create something and let other people use it, or you share what you've learned in a blog post or at a conference presentation or something, then you create value and you let other people use it. And his ethos is that you should always try and create more value than you capture. Capturing value is not bad at all, but you should try and have a balance and make sure that you always create more. And that's it. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions or anything?
Questions are available.
There's got to be at least one question. One guy is like, has it ever gone wrong? Have you shared something that was stupid or something? Oh, that's too bad. Okay. Oh, yeah.
There is one. Okay.
Awesome.
Hi. My name is Alona, and I want to ask you if you had or you heard about some embarrassing experience of sharing something. Part of my question is a lot of developers are shy by nature, introverts by nature. How do you deal with that? How do you inspire those people to share their knowledge? That's the first part, and the second part about the embarrassing experience.
So I'll answer the second question first. I had a really embarrassing moment about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I was working for a company called 500 Pixels in Toronto, and I wrote this post about how you should not use OAuth for your API authentication, and it was not a well-researched post. It was my feelings, and I was trying to get other people to agree with me. And the problem was that a lot of what I said was actually incorrect. And when Hacker News saw it, they started having a conversation about how stupid I was. And that was not a good feeling. So I went to the blog post and I replaced it with a picture of my cat. And I said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. here's a picture of my cat. And everyone loved it. They were like, wow, this is really a responsible developer. So your first question about inspiring developers, this is very difficult. And it's really why I chose this topic for the presentation. When Deanna contacted me about presenting here today, she wanted something that was based on experience and could be helpful to developers as well as businesses, and this was it. It's very difficult to do to tell a software developer who's very shy to go out and put themselves out there. It's risky because something wrong could happen. But as I said earlier, like the worst case scenario is that you're incorrect and you learn something. And I think that when you point out to software developers that the worst that could possibly happen is they learn something new, then they tend to see the value of it after that. So that's what it is.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And I have one question. I know in your company you divide any project to a small solution and make it like libraries you could put in open source. So it's great technology, you can reuse them at all, but it's complex. And if company has one product, is it better to use your solution or not?
Yeah, so I think I understand what you're saying. A really good example is if you only have one product and you have a category for the different colors that you use in your application. We have one called RC Colors that no one else really values from it being open source. But when we created that initially, we only really had one project, maybe two, and we could have just copied and pasted the code. That would have been fine. But by modularizing the code that you use, I feel like you get better cohesion elements coupling. Your code is very modular and well structured instead of all over the place. So even if you keep all of your components private, having them separated into components is still a good idea from a software engineering perspective. And later on, if you ever have the opportunity to reuse code, it's already there for you to use, so it's really easy. That'd be great.
I'd like to ask you what ways do you personally find more efficient to share knowledge, like blogging, for instance, or speaking at conferences that are most valuable for others and payback low?
Sure. That's a really good question. So I really like sharing, as I said earlier, but I found it very difficult to scale, teaching. So writing is really effective. The barrier to entry about writing is very low. All you have to do is speak a language, and it doesn't have to be English either. I've got a friend named Rafa in Spain, and he's starting an iOS blog that is just taking concepts from other people's blogs and translating them into Spanish for developers who don't speak English. So I thought a lot about how to scale, how to reach as many people as I can while not working as much as I can because I'm very lazy. Conference presentations are really great because I do them because I enjoy meeting new people and coming to new cities and exploring the world. But they're not the most effective way to do things to reach a broad amount of people. But they're very good at talking to individual people and I think it's more effective. But it's narrower in scope. Whereas something like I taught a course on a company called Treehouse. They do online video courses. So I went to Orlando and recorded for 3 days a description of how to use core data on iOS. And that was really great. Like it hit the fantastic balance between being really effective and reaching a lot of people. And that was probably the best teaching experience I've had so far.
More questions? Okay, one more.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And I have a question: how do you divide the information you think you should share. So maybe for me it's something new, and for everybody else it's commonly known. So that's my question.
That's a good question too. So it's very easy to classify knowledge in terms of like what you know, what you didn't know, and what everyone else knows. But there are new developers every day who don't know things. We take for granted a lot of knowledge that just kind of comes with the territory, like anything from really complex things like how to use Git or source control in general, all the way down to how to use the terminal and command line. You know, the idea of directory structure is something that a lot of people don't understand, but is really important to know as a developer. So even if you're a beginner and you write this, it's still going to be valuable to someone else. And I'm a strong believer that when you learn something is the perfect time to write about it, because you've transitioned state of minds. You went from not understanding something to understanding something, but you still remember what it's like to be confused. So you are in the perfect position to help other people who are learning that make that transition as well, and make it easier for them to do so than it was for you. So even if it's something that you believe that isn't valuable to others, it's still worth putting out there, because I think you'd be surprised at how valuable it is. For more than 2 years, the most popular page on my blog from Google results was how to create a Git repository in an existing Xcode project. It's one line of terminal commands, Git in it, and that's it. But it was really popular because a lot of people had this question. And when I learned about it, I wrote it, and then other people benefited from that. So don't underestimate yourself. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.